Nancy scrolled through her phone, watching an old video of Celine Dion's That's the Way It Is. The melody tugged at her memories, dragging her back to junior high school, when she and her friends had memorized the lyrics like their lives depended on it. That was a different time. A time of laughter, dreams, and unshaken hope. Now, at 39, she sat alone in her tiny rented room, the walls closing in on her. No husband, no children, no steady job. She sighed, rubbing her temples as an incoming message from her old class group popped up. Reunion coming up. Can't wait to see everyone and catch up on life. Nancy's chest tightened. Catch up on life? She could already hear the dreaded question. So what are you doing now? The answer: 2 first degrees, 2 master's degrees, and nothing to show for them. A job where she was paid whenever her manager felt like it. Failed businesses, hair products no one bought, a puppy selling venture that ended with her giving the dogs away. And a YouTube channel that had once shown promise but had now sunk into the abyss of forgotten content. Despite gratitude for life, sense of hopelessness lingered. All her timelines had collapsed. Marriage by 27 was a distant dream. She questioned if her prayers were unheard, or if God had simply given up on her. Her heart pounded as she heard her cousin's voice outside. Nancy, light bill is due. You got anything on you? She swallowed hard. The truth? She didn't. Nancy, I'm talking to you, her cousin pressed. Nancy exhaled and shook her head. I don't have anything. Her cousin clicked her tongue. You better find something. We can't live on faith alone. Nancy bit her lip as the words stung. She wanted to snap back, but what was the use? She had prayed, fasted, worked, tried everything. But her life was stuck in an unending loop of disappointment. She pulled on her slippers and stepped outside, the harsh Accra sun beating down on her skin. The streets bustled with life, street hawkers dodging cars, women carrying goods on their heads, and workers rushing to catch trotro. Everyone had somewhere to be, something to do, some purpose, except her. As she waited for a trotro, a familiar voice called her name. Nancy. She turned and froze. It was Gyamfi, her university crush, the one who had gone on to become a successful entrepreneur, the one who had once admired her intelligence before life dimmed its shine. Nancy, wow, it's been ages. How are you? She forced a smile. I'm managing. Gyamfi's eyes scanned her face and she could see the concern creeping in. You're still in Accra? She nodded, suddenly feeling small. Yeah. And you? Doing well. Business is booming. We just expanded to East Legon. He grinned, but then his eyes softened. What about you? What are you up to? There it was, the dreaded question. Nancy chuckled dryly. You know, just trying to figure things out. Gyamfi studied her for a moment. I might have something for you. She frowned. What do you mean? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. My company needs an operations manager. I know you're brilliant, Nancy. Let's talk. Nancy stared at the card, her heart pounding. Could this be real? Weeks later, Nancy sat across from Gyamfi in the sleek conference room, her fingers gripping the chair's arms. The interview panel stared at her, waiting for answers. So, Nancy, tell us about your experience in operations management. Her throat tightened. She had no direct experience, but she had managed failing businesses, stretched tiny resources, and juggled impossible deadlines. Would they understand that? She took a breath. I've handled multiple businesses, managed inventory, handled logistics, and built customer relations from scratch. One of the executives scribbled something. But you don't have corporate experience? Nancy clenched her fists under the table. But I know how to make things work. The silence was heavy. Gyamfi gave her an encouraging nod. As she stepped out of the office, her phone vibrated. Final warning, pay up or pack out. Her chest tightened. She needed this job. The call came 2 days later. Gyamfi's voice was calm but firm. Nancy, you didn't get the position. Her breath caught. Oh. But, he continued, I have another idea. Meet me tomorrow. Nancy sat across from Gyamfi at a quiet cafe. He slid a contract across the table. I want you to handle special projects for the company. It's not the position you applied for, but it's a start. She hesitated. I don't want pity, Gyamfi. He smirked. This isn't pity, it's business. You're talented and I'd be a fool not to hire you. She looked at the contract, heart racing. It wasn't the job she had wanted, but it was an open door. A chance. Nancy exhaled. Then slowly she picked up the pen and signed. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to focus. This was her shot. She wasn't going to lose it. As she looked up, Gyamfi was watching her closely. You're going to be fine, Nancy. For the first time in years, she wanted to believe it. Nancy walked into the office, ready to prove herself. But whispers followed her like a shadow. She only got the job because of Gyamfi. She has no real experience. She kept her head high, but her stomach twisted. Gyamfi approached her. Ignore them, he said quietly. Show them why you deserve this. She nodded, but when she received her first task, a complex logistics project with a 1-week deadline, panic set in. Her phone buzzed. Nancy, eviction notice, final deadline approaching. No excuses. Her hands trembled. No time for fear. She buried herself in work. The night before the deadline, she was alone in the office, eyes burning. A single mistake, and everything would fall apart. A shadow loomed over her desk. Gyamfi. You're still here? She exhaled. I can't fail. He placed a hand on the desk. Then don't. She looked up, something shifting inside her. Failure wasn't an option, not this time. Nancy barely felt the hours slip by. At exactly 6:59 a.m., she hit send on the final report. She exhaled, rubbing her tired eyes. It was done. Her heart pounded. Just then, Gyamfi walked in, coffee in hand. He arched a brow. You're still here? She nodded, blinking away exhaustion. Just submitted the report. Gyamfi sat on the desk, sipping his coffee. And? Nancy swallowed hard. And? I don't know. Maybe it's good enough. Maybe I failed. Gyamfi smirked. We'll find out soon. Before she could respond, his phone rang. He listened for a moment, then held it out to her. It's the CEO. He wants to speak to you. Nancy's breath caught. Her hands trembled as she took the phone. Hello? The deep voice on the other end was unreadable. Nancy, I've gone through your report. A pause. Meet me in my office at 9 a.m. We need to talk. The call ended. Nancy stared at the phone, her mind spinning. Was this the breakthrough she needed, or the moment she lost everything? Nancy stood outside the CEO's office, heart pounding. Her palms were sweaty. This was it. Sink or swim. The secretary nodded at her. You can go in now. She pushed the door open. The CEO sat behind a massive desk, expression unreadable. Gyamfi was there too, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. His face gave nothing away. Sit. The CEO's voice was deep, commanding. Nancy sat. He slid a printed report toward her. I read this. She swallowed. And? He leaned forward. Why should I trust this? He said, pointing at the report. Nancy's throat tightened. She clenched her fists under the table. This was it. She was going to get fired. The CEO's eyes locked onto hers. Nancy exhaled. The CEO didn't blink. The room was thick with tension. Then, he leaned back and smirked. Gyamfi was right about you. Nancy's breath hitched. What? He tapped the report. This is impressive. You delivered under pressure and your approach was unconventional, but effective. Gyamfi finally spoke. That's Nancy. The CEO nodded. Starting today, you're officially on board. Full-time, better pay. He leaned in. Don't make me regret it. Nancy blinked. I won't. He stood, extending his hand. Welcome to the team. She shook it, her grip firm, even as her hands trembled. Gyamfi smiled, proud, knowing. As she walked out of the office, phone buzzing with overdue bills and final notices, she exhaled. For the first time in years, she wasn't drowning, she was swimming. The months flew by. She worked harder than she ever had, and for the first time in a long time, her bank account didn't scare her. One afternoon, Gyamfi asked her to lunch. They sat across from each other, the air between them thick with something unspoken. He cleared his throat. "Nancy, I've always admired you, more than you know." Her heart skipped. "Gyamfi, I want us to try, to see where this goes." Tears burned her eyes. She had been invisible for so long she forgot what it felt like to be seen. They took things slow, but Gyamfi was patient, loving, and for the first time Nancy believed she was worthy. At 45, she walked down the aisle in a simple but beautiful dress, tears in her eyes. And a year later, against all odds, she held her baby girl in her arms. Nancy set up a college fund for her daughter, the same way she wished someone had done for her. One evening, as she scrolled through her phone, she saw a message from her old class group. "Reunion coming up, can't wait to catch up on life." This time she smiled. She would be there, because for the first time in her life she had something to say. She smiled to herself, whispering, "The sun never sets on God's mercy." The moral of the story is that resilience, faith, and perseverance can turn even the darkest struggles into triumph. Life may not follow the timelines we expect, but delayed success is not failure. Nancy's journey proves that true worth isn't always measured by conventional achievements, but by the ability to rise, adapt, and keep pushing forward. In the end, love, stability, and self-belief find those who refuse to give up, because the sun never sets on God's mercy.
Hi fam, click the link on the right to dive into yet another captivating tale. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. Until next time, it's bye from us at Apenthene African Stories.